Tonight, inside a high school band room in Lena, Illinois, a group of teenagers had just arrived for a music competition when the building started shaking and the lights went out. Some of them had panic attacks. The roof above them was, at that moment, being partially torn off by a tornado. They are alive. That fact is not a given. It is the narrow margin between a watch and a warning, between a hallway and a basement, between a siren that went off in time and one that did not. Lena is a village of roughly 3,000 people. It sits about 117 miles northwest of Chicago in Stephenson County, near the Wisconsin border. Tonight, it is shut down. No traffic in, no traffic out. Downed power lines and snapped trees across every road. Sheriff Steve Stovall told the public to stay away from the damage zone, while a second round of storms was already moving toward the same village. Now widen the lens. The same storm system that hit Lena produced a tornado in Belton, Missouri, that tore through homes and power lines. It produced another tornado in southern Rochester, Minnesota, where multiple houses were damaged. It sent tornado warnings pushing into Cook County and Will County, Illinois, past 10:30 at night, with a line of rotating supercells moving northeast at 55 miles per hour straight toward the Chicago metro. The Storm Prediction Center issued Tornado Watch number 129 for central and eastern Iowa, northern and west central Illinois, southeast Minnesota, northeast Missouri, and central and southern Wisconsin. They then upgraded the risk to moderate. Level 4 of 5. That is the second highest severe weather designation the federal system issues. And it has been upgraded over a corridor that includes parts of 3 states at the same time. This is not being called a major outbreak yet. Not by the cable networks. Not by the national trending tabs. That gap between what is actually happening on the ground and how much attention it is receiving is itself part of the story. Keep that thought. We are going to need it. Before we go any further, if you are watching this in the alert zone right now, drop your city and your local time in the comments. It matters. And if this is the first time you are hearing about Tornado Watch 129, that is exactly the problem this video is about. Let me set out the thesis up front, because the rest of what follows will build toward it. What is happening tonight is not a single severe weather event. It is 2 independent systems overlapping in the same geography at the same time. One is meteorological. The other is climatological. The meteorological system is the cold front, the shear, the instability, the discrete supercells firing ahead of the line. That is the storm you can see on radar. The climatological system is a transitioning ENSO pattern, a documented multi-decade eastward shift of tornado activity into the Midwest and the Mid-South, and a 2026 calendar that has already produced an EF5 in Indiana and a deadly long-track EF3 from Kankakee to Lake Village. That is the storm you cannot see on radar. You can only see it in the data. When those 2 systems overlap, you do not get a normal tornado outbreak. You get something our current outbreak terminology was not designed to describe. You get a compound hazard with no clean name yet. Part 1, the evening. Start at ground level. April 17th, 2026. The morning satellite loop across the upper Mississippi Valley shows a very moist and unstable air mass ahead of an eastward advancing cold front. The Storm Prediction Center writes into its outlook that conditions are favorable for a few tornadoes, with the potential for a couple of intense tornadoes. Widespread large hail up to 3.5 inches. Scattered damaging wind gusts up to 70 miles per hour. By early afternoon, discrete supercells begin to initiate along a prefrontal corridor of strong instability. For anyone who does not speak meteorology, Discrete supercells are the classic rotating thunderstorms that move as individual isolated cells. They are the ones that produce the strongest tornadoes because they have room to breathe. The updraft can organize, the mesocyclone can tighten, and a well-defined tornado can stay on the ground for miles. By late afternoon, a rotating storm drops a tornado on the ground west of Lena. Radio traffic between the National Weather Service and Stephenson County Public Safety describes it as a large and extremely dangerous tornado. The tornado moves into the village. It tears the roof off Lena High School. It damages the elementary school at 401 Fremont Street. Both buildings have children inside. A 14-year-old named Leo Zach had just walked into the band room for the music competition when the building started shaking. Other students began hyperventilating. The lights went out. They did not leave that room until the storm had passed. There are no confirmed deaths, no serious injuries. Sheriff Steve Stovall calls it extremely fortunate in his statement. He is correct. The margin between this story and a mass casualty event in a rural Illinois school was, at most, a few hundred feet of storm track. Simultaneously, near the Kansas City suburbs, another tornado tears through Belton, Missouri. Damage to homes, power lines, entire sections of the city grid. No fatalities reported there either. Homes in Belton and Lena will not be livable for weeks. To the north, another tornado drops in southern Rochester, Minnesota. Multiple houses damaged. 3 tornadoes, 3 states, same afternoon. Then the line moves east. By 10:15 at night, the National Weather Service Chicago Romeoville office issues a tornado warning for southern Cook County. By 10:31, another one extends into Will County in Illinois and Lake County in Indiana. A line of severe thunderstorms capable of producing both tornadoes and extensive straight-line wind damage is moving northeast at 55 miles per hour toward the third largest metropolitan area in the United States, at night after dark, when warning response rates drop dramatically. And this is where the first mechanical problem shows up. Nighttime tornadoes are statistically about twice as deadly as daytime tornadoes. The data on this is unambiguous. People are less aware. They are less responsive. They are less likely to reach shelter in time. Visibility is effectively zero. Sirens cannot be heard from inside a house with the windows closed. Phone warnings are going to devices that may be on silent. And in April, warning fatigue has already set in because the country has already been through a month of severe weather. The worst hours for a tornado are also the hours when your body is physiologically least equipped to respond to one. That is the ground-level picture tonight. But that is only the first layer of the problem. Part 2, the machinery. To understand why this evening happened, you have to understand what the atmosphere was doing before the first supercell ever went up. An upper-level trough was amplifying across the western United States. That trough created broad southwesterly flow across the plains. At the surface, a cyclone was deepening over the central United States, pulling warm, moist Gulf air northward into Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa. Now layer the thermodynamics on top of that. The prefrontal warm sector had what meteorologists call very high convective available potential energy. The air column was loaded with latent heat. The dew points at the surface were running well above normal for mid-April in this part of the country. That matters because moisture is fuel. Every extra degree of dew point represents more water vapor, more latent heat release inside a thunderstorm updraft, more total energy available to convert into wind, hail, and rotation. Layer the kinematics on top of that. The deep layer wind shear, the change in wind speed and direction between the surface and the mid-levels of the atmosphere, was strong enough to support organized supercells. The low-level shear, the change in the lowest kilometer of the atmosphere, was strengthening through the afternoon. That is the specific shear regime that rotates storms into tornadoes. Not just any rotation. The tight, low-altitude rotation that reaches the ground. Hodographs, which are the graphical representations of that wind profile with altitude, were enlarging into the afternoon. An enlarging hodograph is a signature that professional severe weather forecasters look for when they are deciding whether to upgrade a risk from enhanced to moderate. When hodographs enlarge in the same hours that instability peaks, and a cold front is pushing in behind them, you get discrete supercell tornadoes. That is exactly the sequence that produced Lena. But it is also the sequence that produced Belton and Rochester and the Will County cell. 4 separate rotating storms, each from a different seed, across a corridor that stretches roughly 600 miles from Minnesota to Missouri. This is the technical definition of a tornado outbreak. Multiple tornadoes produced by the same synoptic scale weather system over a short time window. By definition, we are already inside one. The SPC language admits it. Moderate risk. Potential for a couple of intense tornadoes. Tornado Watch 129. The agency whose job is to not overstate risk has been quietly stacking upgrade language onto this event all day. The only thing missing is the national attention to match. Here is where the compound problem begins to show its shape. Because the atmospheric machinery you just walked through is not unique to April 17th. It is the same machinery that has been running for 6 weeks. In early March, the same kind of dynamic produced the outbreak that dropped an EF3 tornado on Kankakee, Illinois. That storm tracked 35.6 miles, killed 3 people, and damaged more than 500 buildings. The same supercell produced hail between 5 and 6 inches in diameter, which, if confirmed, would break the Illinois state record set at 4.75 inches. 106 total tornadoes were confirmed during that outbreak. A few days after that, on March 10th, an EF5 tornado tore through Wells County, Indiana. Winds estimated in excess of 200 miles per hour. A 14.6-mile path of near total destruction. That was only the second EF5 tornado in the United States since 2013. The first was in Enderlin, North Dakota, in June 2025. Before Enderlin, there had been a 12-year gap without a single EF5 tornado in this country. Now, we have had 2 in less than a year. By mid-April, AccuWeather and the Storm Prediction Center are reporting roughly 304 confirmed tornadoes for 2026 so far. Over 200 of those came in March alone, which is the 3rd most active March in the modern record. And May, the single most active month of the year, has not started yet. The machinery is not resolving. It is stacking. Part 3, the eastward shift. Now introduce the second system, the one you cannot see on radar. In 2018, Victor Gensini, a meteorology professor at Northern Illinois University, and a team of researchers published a study in the peer-reviewed journal Climate and Atmospheric Science. The paper analyzed tornado frequency across the United States from 1979 to 2017. It identified a statistically significant eastward shift of tornado frequency and impacts, relatively lower tornado frequency in parts of the traditional tornado alley, especially north-central Texas and the Houston area, relatively higher tornado frequency in parts of the Mid-South and the Midwest, especially eastern Arkansas, the Memphis area, northern Mississippi, and northward into Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, and western Ohio. Translate that out of the journal language, Sonoras. The tornado map of the United States has been quietly migrating east for 4 decades. A separate National Geographic analysis using National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration data found that southern Illinois, western Kentucky, and western Tennessee had a 90 to 100% annual probability of a tornado touchdown during the 1994 to 2024 period. That is up from a 60 to 70% probability, covering largely the same area during the 1955 to 2024 period. In plain terms, the odds that any given square mile of that corridor sees a tornado in any given year have risen meaningfully within living memory. Why is this happening? The mainstream scientific explanation ties back to thermodynamics. A warming Gulf of Mexico pumps more water vapor into the southeastern United States. Warmer, moister, low-level air creates more atmospheric instability. The dry line, which is the imaginary boundary that separates the wetter eastern United States from the drier western United States, appears to be shifting eastward as well. Combine those trends, and you get more favorable tornado environments forming further east than they used to form. This is where the light conspiracy thread usually starts. People look at the eastward shift, and they look at the unprecedented 2026 season, and they start asking questions. Is this climate change? Is this weather modification? Is this something the government knows about and is not telling us? Is there a hidden cause? Let me be clear about where the evidence actually sits. The weather modification thread does not withstand physics. No disclosed technology, no theoretically feasible engineering, can produce the continental-scale atmospheric dynamics required to steer a jet stream or generate 3,000 joules per kilogram of convective available potential energy across a 1,000-mile warm sector. The energy involved in one of these outbreaks is on the order of multiple nuclear weapons per hour. The scale is planetary. It is not a button somebody is pressing. The climate change thread is more defensible, but more nuanced than the social media version. The peer-reviewed researchers studying this shift have stated directly that they cannot yet say for certain whether the eastward migration is caused by natural variability or by human-induced climate change. What they can say is that the signal is real and measurable. Something is changing. Attribution is the open question. The ENSO thread is where the picture actually gets interesting. The Climate Prediction Center has the tropical Pacific in an active transition. La Niña conditions are decaying. ENSO neutral is favored through April to June. El Niño is likely to emerge by May to July, with a 61 to 62% probability. In other words, the ocean underneath the jet stream is switching phases right now. Here is the part that matters. The transition years between La Niña and El Niño are historically the most violent severe weather years in the modern record. The April 1974 Super Outbreak, 148 tornadoes in a single 24-hour window, the deadliest single-day tornado event of the 20th century, occurred during an ENSO transition. The April 2011 outbreak, 362 tornadoes in a single day, the largest single-day tornado count ever recorded in the United States, occurred during a La Niña to neutral transition. The 2026 transition resembles both of those years in structure. A decaying La Niña, a rapid shift toward neutrality, and El Niño loading behind it. An amplified spring jet stream, record ocean heat content in the Gulf of Mexico. That does not mean 2026 will produce a super outbreak. It means the atmospheric conditions that preceded the worst outbreaks in American history are present right now, in the same geography where they were in 1974, in the same season, with an eastward shift of the tornado corridor layered on top. Is this a coincidence or something else? Let me know in the comments. Part 4, the coverage gap. Now introduce the social layer. A moderate risk. In the upper Midwest does not generate the same national attention as a hurricane making landfall in Florida. A tornado that damages a school in a rural Illinois village of 3,000 people does not dominate the cable networks the way a tornado that hits Dallas or Atlanta would. This is not a moral failing of the media. It is a structural feature of how coverage is allocated. But it has consequences. Warning response rates depend on warning awareness. If you do not know that your state is under a tornado watch, you are statistically less likely to shelter in time when the siren goes off. National media coverage is one of the primary vectors by which that awareness propagates in the 24 hours before an outbreak. When coverage is low, warning response lags. The 2025 tornado outbreak of March 13th to 16th, for comparison, received substantial national coverage because it produced 43 confirmed fatalities across 8 states. 118 tornadoes, $11 billion in damage, and an outbreak intensity score of 147. That outbreak was officially classified as historic. It included 2 EF4 tornadoes with wind estimates up to 190 miles per hour, including the Diaz, Arkansas tornado that tracked 18.6 miles. The 2025 outbreak worked because the death toll forced the coverage. By the time the country was paying attention, dozens of people had already died. The 2026 outbreak we are inside right now has had a different kind of warning. An EF5 in Indiana in March. An EF3 that killed 3 people from Kankakee to Lake Village. Record-breaking hail. 304 tornadoes by mid-April, with the most active month of the year still ahead. A moderate risk in 3 states simultaneously. Tornado Watch 129, and still, the coverage has not scaled to match. A tornado in Lena, Illinois, with children inside a high school is, by every measurable input, a major national news event. The fact that nobody died is a function of chance, not of planning. If the storm had tracked 200 yards to the south, we would be discussing a school building collapse tonight instead of a damaged roof. The coverage gap is not neutral. It feeds back into the compound hazard. Lower national attention means lower warning propagation. Lower warning propagation means lower preparedness. Lower preparedness means, statistically, more casualties in the next event in the same corridor. And there will be a next event. The extended forecast has additional severe weather potential layered through the coming week. The SPC has already flagged multiple days in the day 3 through day 7 range with elevated risk. The pattern is not breaking. It is reloading. Part 5. The framework gap. Pull back to the widest view. We have an atmosphere loaded with near-summer thermodynamics in mid-April. We have a tornado geography that has measurably migrated east into densely populated Midwestern and Mid-South corridors. We have an ENSO transition that resembles the worst tornado years in modern American history. We have a 2026 calendar that has already produced an EF5 and a long-track deadly EF3. We have a coverage infrastructure that is not escalating attention proportional to the actual risk. We have a warning framework that was built around daytime supercells over open prairie and is now being asked to protect densely populated towns at night. Any one of those factors, in isolation, is a manageable problem. The Storm Prediction Center has decades of institutional experience issuing watches and warnings for discrete tornado outbreaks. The National Weather Service has extensive protocols for nocturnal events. Local emergency management across the Midwest is generally competent and well-drilled. The problem is not any one factor. The problem is that all of them are stacking simultaneously in the same geography at the same time. That is the definition of a compound hazard. And the current outbreak framework, the thing that decides whether something gets called an outbreak and gets the corresponding national response, is not designed to recognize a compound hazard in real time. It is designed to recognize a single severe weather event with a clean beginning and a clean end. What we are inside of tonight does not have a clean beginning and a clean end. It started in March with the Kankakee EF3. It escalated with the Wells County EF5. It continued through the April 1st to April 7th outbreak that produced 13 tornadoes across Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana. It extended through Tornado Watch 129 tonight. It will continue through the extended forecast into next week. It is one long event. Our definitions are not built to describe one long event. The real story of tonight is not the tornado in Lena, as serious as that tornado was. The real story is the gap between what the atmosphere is actually doing and what our emergency framework is prepared to call it. That gap is where the casualties accumulate, quietly, across individual events that never quite add up to a single headline, big enough to force the country to pay attention. The people in Lena went to a music competition tonight. The people in Belton were at home in their kitchens. The people in Rochester were putting their kids to bed. None of them were thinking about an ENSO transition or a peer-reviewed eastward shift study or a moderate-risk corridor. They were thinking about Friday night. The atmosphere was thinking about something else entirely. Somewhere in northeastern Illinois right now, as this video goes up, a line of storms is moving through the dark at 55 miles per hour toward 9 million people in the Chicago metropolitan area. Warnings are going out to phones on nightstands. Sirens are going off in suburbs where most residents are already asleep. The same compound hazard that tore the roof off Lena High School a few hours ago is still in motion. The map will be different by morning. How different depends on geography, on timing, on the precise track of a handful of individual supercells, and on how many people in the path happen to look at their phones in the next 90 minutes. The atmosphere is not done with the Midwest tonight. The calendar is not done with the Midwest this month. The ENSO transition is not done with the continent this season. If you are in the path, shelter now. Lowest floor, interior room, away from windows. Charge your phone. Tell somebody where you are. The next hour matters more than the last hour did. If you are not in the path, look at the people you know who are. Pick up the phone. Tornado Watch 129 is one line in a much longer document. The document has been writing itself since March. It is not finished yet. And for the people in Lena, in Belton, in Rochester, and in every small town in the corridor whose name did not make it into a national broadcast tonight, the margin between a story and a tragedy is still just a few hundred feet of storm track. Stay with them.